Hello, all, and welcome to another episode of Your One Black Friend. I have a fair bit to talk to you about today. First and foremost, increase the speed. Whatever platform you're listening to, bump that speed up. If you are on YouTube, on Spotify, on Google, Apple. Each platform enables you, they have a mechanism on each platform that enables you to increase the speed. I call it increasing the upload speed of data into your brain. Increase it, right? It's probably going to be an hour-long podcast, if I had to guess, 45 minutes to an hour. Normally, it's a bit daunting, but I promise you, your mind can take in the information faster than I can give it to you, right? And let's say you had an hour to listen to this podcast, and let's say you doubled it up. You can listen to the podcast twice. Why would you want to listen to the podcast twice? Well, because the more your mind is exposed to any information, the more familiar your mind becomes with it, and the more of the information presented your mind takes in, right? You ever watch a movie the first time and find it entertaining or interesting, and then you go back and watch it again for whatever reason because you liked it and you're like, holy shit, like I missed that the first time. That is the approach that I take to listening to anything. I tend to loop. I tend to watch something that I'm very interested in more than once. I tend to listen to an audiobook more than once, twice, sometimes 3 times, because repeated exposure to any sort of thing is how your brain learns. I've used this analogy before, but when you were a child and you were learning your ABCs, you didn't just hear the alphabet song one time, and there's a reason why they put it in a song so you can repeat it, so you can learn. That's how the brain learns. And every time I listen to the same book over and over again, it's sort of a reflection of where I am, the progress that my mind has made through life. And so that same book, Kabbalion, immediately comes to mind. I've listened to that book so many times that every time I go back and listen to it, my level of awareness has increased. And so I pick up things in the book that I missed the first time, or 3 months ago, or a year ago, because I'm growing in awareness and my consciousness is expanding. So things that may not have even made sense to me a year ago, when I go back and re-listen to it, I go, oh shit, I missed that. And that's absolute truth. So I encourage you to do the same, not just with my podcast, with anybody's podcast. There's some podcasts out there that have a lot of information, but some people tend to be intimidated by the length. Right? But if you increase the speed, then it's not so daunting. And then it allows you in the same amount of time that you want to listen to episode one time, you can listen to it twice, and then you can take in the information. I'm all about learning here, right? We're all about learning. Every instant, every situation that I encounter, every situation that I get into, the first thing that I say to myself is, what am I supposed to learn from this? What was I supposed to learn from this? And that is always my approach. I remember a conversation I had with an individual who they said to me, we were like halfway through talking, and they said something to me to the effect of, wow, you've taught me like 2 things already so far, which is weird for me because nobody like teaches me anything. I've never really encountered anybody that would actually teach me anything. And the level of arrogance where they said that actually made my skin coil. It was coming from a place, it was a man, and it was coming from a place, and not man-hating here, but that mindset is unhealthy, and unhealthful. It's pure ego. Nothing wrong with ego. The ego is what it is, right? And we talk about how we can sort of harness the ego and use it to our benefit. That's the point of the game, right? Is to wake up from the ego, realize that you're not the ego, right? It's an awareness. We are in an awareness training simulation, right? So the ego's there. I know a lot of people talk about you need to kill the ego. Why? When I pick up my phone, right? Imagine your body is your cell phone. I've used this analogy before, but obviously repetition is how we learn. Imagine your body is a cell phone, and the voice, your internal monologue, that ego is your Siri. And yes, you spend a lot of your life identifying with Siri, thinking that Siri sort of like talking is you, but it's not you, right? It wouldn't be you if you had to listen to the internal monologue. It's just the voice of the ego. It is the mind in the ego, and the ego is essentially your avatar's personality. If you want a sort of a deeper dive into that topic, please check out my other podcast. It's a 15-episode anthology. It's called The Dark Oracle's Guide to the Multiverse. I might kick that up again sometime late this year, maybe. We'll see. But a brief overview, that's a really good podcast to listen to. Increase the speed. You get through it in, a couple of days or so. So the ego is just a personality. Like, how like more and more like they're trying to come up with like Alexas or phones or whatever, smart devices where the AI contained within the game, or not within the game, the AI contained within the product or the electronic, they're trying to give it more and more personality, right? Make it more and more intelligent. So I'm saying that the ego is the personality of the avatar in which your consciousness is presently inhabiting. Rewind the last sentence a few times and loop it until your brain can absorb it, or I should say your avatar's brain can absorb it, right? So you are not the computer. You are not the machine, the human body machine, right? You're not the ego. You are the consciousness that has been uploaded into the form to enter into the simulation so that you can operate within the simulation. That's all your body is. It's a VR machine that allows you to integrate within our virtual reality simulation. I doubt if you listened this far, that you are unaware of the fact that that is the premise of this show. But just in case, for super new, maybe you've stumbled across the YouTube channel and are not aware of my TikTok or Instagram or other platforms or anything about me, and you're just like, oh, I'm just going to give this a listen because it seems interesting. So what we do here is we operate from the premise that we are in fact living in a simulation. Can I prove to you that we are living in a simulation? I absolutely cannot. Neither can you prove to me that we are not living in a simulation. And seeing as 99% of the world operates as though we are not living in a simulation, that information, that mindset, that perspective, that point of view is out there. You can get that anywhere. But what we're talking about here is a different perspective, right? What if we are? And so that's what this podcast is and has become, right? We are just straight up operating from the standpoint that we are in fact living in a simulation, and then we go from there. We're just sharing ideas, but we discuss these ideas and these theories as though there are as though it's factual, right? Because that's why not. It helps expand the brain a little bit. So if you're like, wait, what's going on? That's what's going on. It's a fun episode. It's a fun podcast in general. It's like brain candy, and it's it's fun for people who don't get to have these sort of conversations out in the matrix, so to speak, right? So that's what we do here, and it's fun. Jump in, comment. It's a safe space for people who have looked up, spent their whole lives looking up, looking around and thinking, something's not right? Everything we've been told about this world doesn't really make sense, doesn't add up. The reason why I lean heavy on the simulation hypothesis is because it's what makes the most sense to me. It's what explains everything the best. I come from a religious background. I grew up in a Catholic, my mother was Catholic, my father was a pastor, so extremely Christian household, and religion did not make sense to me as I got older. And the fact that you are not allowed to seek answers beyond one book was weird to me. That's not how I operate. And a lot of the incongruencies in there just made me uncomfortable the older I got. For example, you are an all-knowing, all-powerful God. So you know everything that's going to happen, right? And yet you choose to create entities that eventually will fall. And you give them free will, even though you then get upset because they act on said free will that you had bestowed upon them. You also create a creature that is eventually going to tempt your creations into falling, right? And then when that happens, you damn everybody, you kick them out of paradise, and then you make your creatures that you knew were going to disobey you. And more importantly, because they didn't have knowledge in the first place before they ate from the tree of knowledge, so they were relatively ignorant, they didn't know one, what the fuck free will is. How many people you think walking around right now know what free will is? If I ask the average person, do you have free will? They're going to say yes. They're going to say yes. So even people alive now don't know what free will. And the answer to that is you don't know what free will is. And also most people, the majority of us, the free will is actually a fucking illusion. But that's another conversation. We've had this conversation. Check out the other episodes. I don't want to like repeat myself when you could just listen to other episodes. So this is for my regulars. But join the club. Like we're in, we're good. We're going. To carry on, right? So you knew all this shit was going to happen, yeah? And then you did not bestow them, your creatures, Adam and Eve that you created. You didn't bestow them with the knowledge to make informed decisions. You just allowed a tempter to kind of walk in there and tempt them, even though they didn't realize that they were being tempted. They probably assumed that it was safe because these were essentially ignorant children because they were ignorant by definition because they hadn't eaten from the tree. And then you curse them, kick them out. You sanction rape, you sanction murder, you sanction child sacrifices, you torture people who believe in you, just for shits and giggles. And then in the New Testament comes along, you decide that you're going to give up your only child, even though we're all children of God, but that's another conversation. You decide that you're going to give up your only child to come to this world and to offer himself as a sacrifice for penance for the sins that your creations created or did or performed or whatever action word I want to use there, thousands of years ago. But who is the sacrifice to? It's weird to me, right? So like when Isaac and Abraham, when Abraham was supposed to sacrifice, I think Isaac, we knew that Abraham was sacrificing Isaac to God, right? Yahweh. So every time that there's a sacrifice, like a blood, even Cain and Abel, story of Cain and Abel, they're offering sacrifice. It is to God. So who is God sacrificing his son to? Is he killing his own? Did he kill his own son in order to offer his own son as a sacrifice to himself? That's weird, right? Or was he offering it as if Satan was the God or became the God of this world, which is what we're told, then the God, the creator of everything, who knew all of this was going to happen, then decide to sacrifice his son to the devil as penance for our sin. What the fuck is going on? Yeah. So anyway, you say all of that. Oh, and by the way, you have the ability this whole time, because you're God, to just kill the devil at any point in time, but you don't. And instead you kill your child. That's weird. Random tangent. That's not what this episode is about. But growing up with a religious background, I sort of realized that, they're not, this book doesn't make any sense to me, and I need more answers. And so I put the book aside and then just started voraciously consuming information. I still do, to bring up the conversation I had with the friend, quote friend, not really friend, no longer friend, who said that they are surprised that they were able to learn from me, which I'm guessing is because I'm a female, or maybe they just think they're smarter than everybody, and that's fun. My response to that is, you can learn from anybody. You can learn from anything. I can learn from an insect. I can learn from a tree. I can learn from the sun. I can learn from a child. I can learn from a baby. I can learn from air. There's so much information that we have at our fingertips. And so what do we do here? We pull information from everywhere. We pull information from quantum physics and theoretical physics, from psychology, from history, from theology, from Eastern mythology, from metaphysics, from philosophy, if I said that already, from everywhere, right? And we're going to pull from all of these sources, and we're going to creatively explore the nature of our reality. Do I have proof that we're living in a simulation? Well, if your prerequisite for proof means that it has to be lab-tested scientific proof, there's no way that I can prove that in a lab setting. But I do trust the thousands of people, if not at this point, millions of people, who continuously report strange occurrences. Now, strange occurrences, shifts, glitches, whatever, interactions with entity that are non-corporeal. We have millions of people at this point throughout history that have reported strange occurrences, right? And this world attempts to label their experiences so that they can be discounted, so that an ongoing narrative that no, this world is in fact, quote, real, whatever the fuck that means. The mental gymnastics is weird to me. It's creepy to me that you are willing to ignore the stories of now millions of people who are saying, no, something's not right here. And reality can be inconsistent, right? And the flow of time, right, is actually variable. Time can move faster in one situation with one person than, a different situation. So now the flow of time is relative. That's Einstein, right? So you have all of these people saying different things. And yet we still want to persist with this mindset that what we see is all there is, even though we have scientists who talk about neutrinos, who talk about subatomic particles, who theorize about, quantum entanglement and many worlds and parallel universes and all of these things that we can't necessarily see. Prove that. Right? If you're walking around willing to dismiss other people's experiences or other people's ideas simply because they cannot prove it in a lab setting, you are missing and you are discounting a significant chunk of the pie that is this reality. And so you cannot dismiss what you consider anecdotal evidence, right? Near-death experiences, astral projection, out-of-body experiences, alien encounters, or communications with non-terrestrial, extraterrestrial, or non-human species, or whatever you want to call it. All of these things that occur, egregores, tulpas, whatever. You can't dismiss all of that simply because it cannot be replicated in a lab. That's dumb. That is dumb. That is incredibly dumb. Right? Here's a story that I got from the book after. I don't remember the author at the moment, but it's about near-death experiences. He's a predecessor. No, he's not a predecessor. He worked with Raymond Moody. And he's a brilliant doctor, brilliant scientist, and he just kind of is continuing his explanations as to it was a scientific approach. So he wanted to take a scientific approach to the phenomenon of NDEs. Worth a read. But the the story that he gave, the explanation that he gave in the book was this. He said, you cannot prove, you can, but you cannot prove in a lab setting that parachutes will protect you when you jump out of a plane, will save your life. You can't really test that in a lab, right? But if I told you, hey, jumping out of this plane with a parachute will save your life, and your response is prove it. Okay, sure, let's go to a lab and let's prove it. Right? In order to prove that, though, you're gonna have to test this in a lab, right? That means you're gonna have one person jumping out of the plane with a parachute, and then you're going to have one person who jumps out of a plane without a parachute. Now, common sense and a lot of fucking evidence around this situation will tell you that the person who jumps out of a plane without a parachute has a significantly lower probability of survival than a person who does. You don't need to test that in a lab. Some things just go without saying. All right, and so I want to take that same mindset. He uses that mindset to discuss NDEs, but I want to use it to apply it to simulation hypothesis. Everything, it's just like jumping out of the plane with a parachute versus without. Everything around it is sort of pointing out to the fact that we are in a simulation. The biggest one for me has always been that the sun is white now. The sun is fucking white now. The sun is white now. It's white as fuck now. That's the biggest Mandela effect for me, by far. And the amount of people that aren't talking about it is crazy to me. Like, that has just always been like a kicker for me. You cannot tell me. I spend the time deep diving this. To the point where I've looked up art from like the 1500s where it's depicting the midday sun and it's always shown as yellow. Even the sunflower The reason why the sunflower is called a sunflower is because the sun is fucking yellow, or at least it was. It's now white as fuck now. And some people say, well, maybe it's changed because of climate change or whatever. No, that's not what's happening. Go look into it. Even NASA, when you ask them, at least it was at this time, I took screenshots. I don't know if they've changed it, but at a time when I sat down and actually researched this, because I was like, what the fuck is going on? I typed into Google, what color is the sun? And obviously it was yellow, right? And I went and I saw images by NASA depicting the sun as yellow. If the sun was never yellow, then daisies would be called sunflowers, right? White daisies would be called sunflowers, right? Not sunflowers. Sunflowers would be called daisies. So something clearly happened. The funny thing for me with Mandela effects is that when people are Mandela affected, try to explain to people who are not Mandela affected that they remember things, specific things, and they're like saying like, no, the violence in which they say, no, this was not how that was. I don't remember it like that. It's not one person saying it. I can understand maybe you not agreeing to one person making a claim. But when a large group of people keep saying, no, I remember something. I remember this. I remember Ed McMahon's, Publishers Clearinghouse being an actual thing. And then you have other people coming around and saying, no, you don't. How dare you? How dare you tell somebody else that they didn't have the reality experience that they were telling you that they fucking had? How fucking rude is that? And how fucking arrogant is that? Fuck off. The amount of disrespect that we have for each other's life experiences, there's no way for you to guarantee that my reality experience is the same as yours. And ultimately, to take that 2 steps further, I know from everything that I've been reading that at a certain point within the simulation, I'm going to interact with human beings who are having a vastly, dramatically different reality experience than I've had to date. Case in point, we're going to talk about NPCs. Here's the thing. Somebody had left a comment on one of my videos about, what was the last video I put out? There was a video I put out like 2 videos ago where I was talking about, so I said that sleep is how we exit the simulation. So a lot of people, a lot of like religions and things like that, they want you to believe that when you die is when you exit the simulation. And I was like, fuck that. Why do you have to be, why is it when you die? Right? So we've been sort of building up to the 4th dimension being like essentially a kind of quote heaven, right? To us here. But I take it a step further based on like everything that I've been reading and just intuition that I think we exit into the 4th dimension every night that we sleep. I genuinely believe that. I realize that right when you fall asleep and right when you're about to wake up is when we tend to dream. But then there's still like a large chunk of space where we're not dreaming, we're not in REM, and it's just darkness. I find it hard to believe, as efficient as this reality is, that your consciousness is just sitting in that form. Bullshit. I just finished reading Far Journeys by Robert Monroe. And for those of you who are not familiar with Robert Monroe, he was, the lead scientist, metaphysicist, is that a word? That was utilized in the CIA's Gateway experiment. So Google CIA Gateway experiment. So they used his writings and they used his research and his institute to perform experiments in astral projection, or by his accounts, he called them out-of-body experiences, OOBEs. This is a thing. The CIA did it. It's out there. Googleable, heavily redacted, but it is out there. And so I decided to check out his book, and I thought it was interesting. Well, what he said was when people astral project, or they sort of get engaged in essentially traveling outside of their bodies to other worlds or other realities, or just the in-between, time moves differently. So for like a minute in our reality, a person who is having an OOBE can experience like an hour, like a long stretch of time. Now, if that's accurate, and I'm not saying it's not, I'm not saying it is, I'm open to just because I haven't had that experience doesn't mean that he's lying. I say that again, just because I haven't had that experience does not give me the right nor the audacity to discount his reports and his experiences, I'm keeping my mind open. I'm taking it with a grain of salt, but I do think it's information that is valid and worth taking into. And I've had several people reach out to me over the years. I've been talking about this stuff. There's a lot of you who've been listening to me since I was like talking about this stuff on Instagram years ago, 6-7 years ago. So I've been talking about this, actually probably longer, for a very long time, about this kind of stuff for a very long time. So I've had people who reached out to me and told me of all the different experiences that they've had, via astral projection, lucid dreaming, with LSD or with, hallucinogens, things like that. And my mind is open. Just because I haven't had that experience doesn't mean that their experiences are wrong or that they're lying. Another anecdote, or analogy rather, that I got from the book after was the doctor said, look, when you say that something is fraudulent, in order for something to be fraudulent or falsified, there has to be something real, right? It has to be based on something, right? So fool's gold is based on the existence of real gold, right? So we know that fool's gold is just fake gold, but that gold is still gold, right? There's not just fool's gold. Get it, right? So even if, most people who are reporting that they astral project, let's just say on some weird, we're just living here in a reality where like most people are fucking lying, fine, but that doesn't mean that everybody's lying. Okay. Another analogy he gave, the book was good, like really good analogies, I like that. Another analogy that he gave was a black swan. If you lived your entire life only seeing white swans, right, yes, it would make sense for you to think like, yes, that swans only come in white. However, if in some circumstance you do encounter a black swan, then you should adjust your mindset, right? You should adjust your mindset to be able to consider that, okay, swans aren't all white. Swans do come in different colors. Another writer, he wrote Hallucinations, I think Oliver Sacks, he used the same analogy, and so did V.S. Ramachandran. This is a neuroscientist. They all use the same analogy. He wrote Elephant in the Brain, I think. They all use the same analogy. An exception to the rule should change the rule, right? So if you're saying humans cannot astral project, right? But then you have 100,000 people who are saying, actually, I have and I do leave my body. Even if by some weird coincidence or some weird fluke, not even coincidence, wrong choice of word, but let's just say all of those hundreds of thousands of people who don't know each other are all basically still telling the same fucking lie for whatever fucking reason. Out of those hundreds of thousands of people, there has to be at least 3 who are telling the truth. So then that does mean that a human being can, in fact, leave their body. And just because I cannot leave my body consciously doesn't negate the accounts of all those hundreds of thousands of people. The same thing applies to near-death experiences. All right? A lot of people who have NDEs or out-of-body experiences, while they're near death and brain dead even, and they come back and they recount their stories. A lot of them, when they're telling them, they're usually telling these stories out of, they're afraid to tell the story because they're afraid of being told, considered crazy, right? So that should tell you at some level that it is at least true to them. So it's worth kind of keeping in mind and not dismissing, simply because, just not dismissing the recounts and the stories of people simply because it doesn't fit into your worldview. And a lot of individuals who tend to do this are also people who consider themselves, quote, intelligent and scientists. And they figure, being a scientist is the same as being a blind skeptic and just willfully just ignoring anything that doesn't fit into a materialistic perspective of how they want to see the world. But that's bullying, isn't it? And it's closed-mindedness. All right. Just because it doesn't fit into the way you see the world doesn't mean that that's the world. The world does not give a fuck about how you see the world. You might have the power to determine whether or not people believe, right? Whether or not the masses believe what these people who have had these experiences are saying, yeah, that might give you the power, the authority. That's more of a power thing. It has no reflection on actual reality. It's just the perception of the masses, the unthinking masses, for the most part. So I tend to delve into all of these sort of stories, right, and all of these sort of chapters, all of these sort of fields of study, if you will, with an open mind. Because, as I've said, if you want to understand the nature of our reality, you must approach things with an open mind, not so open that your brain falls out, but open enough to consider the sources and understand that everybody can't be lying about aliens. Even if you say that, okay, everybody that has had an experience with an extraterrestrial, even though now, Google this shit, now the government's just came, I think this year, like a couple months ago, they basically said, again, they reiterated, like last year they put out some information that was like, yeah, okay, UFOs are real, but we don't know what they are, and then they just left it. And then this year they kind of doubled down and they were saying, yeah, I think like aliens are real. But monkeypox. So, right. So people are just like, a lot of people are being distracted and they like kind of like trickle information here and there, whatever. But, 20 years ago, if a person came out and said like, I think aliens are real, right? Or non-human intelligences are real, they would have been laughed at, mocked, scorned. Not even 20 years, like you can go back further. Like they wouldn't have even been able to say it. And now more and more, this has become sort of like our conversation. So we're working up to something, and I think it's going to be sort of a grand reveal. But all of that said, even if they are real, what does that mean? Well, to me, it just means that they're just another aspect. It's just a new race, a new playable race. That's all I look at it. So I love the simulation hypothesis because everything fits neatly into that, right? So if they are in fact aliens that do sort of exist, well, they could just be a new playable race within the simulation. That's it. Doesn't mean that they programmed the simulation. Doesn't mean that they didn't, but it doesn't mean that they programmed the simulation. It certainly doesn't mean that they're worthy of veneration or praise, but observation, if anything. We just tend to, as human beings, venerate anything that is even remotely above, quote, above us, right? And we need to probably stop doing that and taking a step back, and just like observing things objectively instead of wanting to denigrate ourselves and and praise anything that is not human. I think to be human is something very special. I think to be a conscious entity within a material form and to be able to wake up within a material form and to be able to sort of control this body and not have it control you, I think is the ultimate goal of this game. And I think that any entity that is walking this earth without a body is not something that we should fear or worship. I think it's something that we should understand that they are lacking. All right. And so just being mindful of that. A lot of people, when they talk about these topics, they sort of present these entities as entities that we should, once again, venerate. And my response is that, well, real quick, my brain was like, how can you even hate from the club? I don't see how you can hate from outside the club. You can't even get in, right? Like, why should I venerate you? I have a body. Like, I'm a consciousness with a body. You are a consciousness without a body. So you and I are not the same. Somehow I'm here doing what I'm supposed to do. And my guess is, from everything that I've read about people who have interacted with non-corporeal entities, is that these entities tend to also want to take people's fucking bodies, which is why I don't fuck with astral projection. Not saying you shouldn't. I just personally, I like my body, and I just feel like I don't want, somebody hopping up in here and hijacking my shit. So once again, let's shift the topic now to NPCs. Sorry, that was a huge segue. So let's get back on track. So I had a video that I posted that when you sleep is when we exit the simulation, we go to the fourth dimension. I have had several videos building up to that conclusion. And in those videos, I talked about the fact that we are, in fact, our consciousness are multi-dimensional beings capable of shifting from the first dimension, the second dimension, third dimension, fourth dimension continuously. I am sort of leaning away from us being sentient AI, and more just being conscious entities that willingly chose to come into the game for whatever reason. And the reason why I'm leaning towards that conclusion I'm going to delve into it a little bit, like towards the middle of this episode. I think this is going to be a little bit longer because I actually wrote an essay that I'd like to read to you guys, and I have to like take the time to find it. I posted it to my stories on Instagram. But I should probably like record a video about it and post it to my YouTube so that at least you guys can, have it. That's a good idea, actually. But my theory has to do with darkness and light. And I'm going to delve into it. But in that video, sidetracking again, but let's get back on topic. Just like I have to remind myself. I was going to say, just remind me to come back to that. Like, how are you guys going to remind me? You're not listening in real time. It's not live. So anyway, but I don't think that you have to wait till you die to leave the simulation. I think every night we go to sleep, that blank space between dreams, that dark space between these, those 6 hours between dreams, like I mentioned, the astral projection and Robert Monroe's OOBE experiences, 6 hours is a large fucking chunk of time, right? If a minute in our reality equaled hours outside of our bodies, then 6 hours, you could log out of the third dimension. Your consciousness could log out of the third dimension, still tethered in a way, but go to another time, to another reality, and be doing God knows what. You could be fucking playing as 5 or 6 different characters while you're sleeping. And I almost kind of wonder if that's what explains like things like, transgender people and homosexuality and things like that. This is not like a denigration at all, but I'm saying like if you're playing all of these characters, then like if I'm playing, when I go to sleep, right? Even if I take a nap, if I take a 2-hour nap, while I'm taking that nap, if I'm playing as like a warrior king or something like that consistently between like these are my 2 favorite avatars. I love Jolie in Earth 2022, but I also love playing as like Genghis Khan or something. I don't know. Well, my consciousness, right? I'm gonna bring some attributes back in between, right? Because the consciousness, everything sort of gets absorbed in it. I'm gonna bring some attributes back, so that might make me a little bit. Okay, maybe Genghis Khan is not the right word, but it's not the right sort of avatar. But you know what I mean, like what I'm trying to say here. Because without offending anybody, I don't mean offense to this, but I'm just saying it's your consciousness toggling back and forth between all these lives, and I don't think it happens just like simultaneously. Like while you're sleeping, you go and do something else. I also think that you could have been a past life even. A masculine character and I'm a female now. But what we think of as our past life could be happening right now because what have we said continuously? The flow of time is an illusion. All of time is happening at once. So synchronistically, if you look at the timeline in a linear fashion, that is an illusion. I could go to sleep now and then go and live my past life now and still be the same entity. So it's happening simultaneously. It's fun to think about. I promise you. And the more you get exposed to this and the more I talk about it, the more it's going to start to settle in and you're going to really enjoy it. But so that could very well be happening. So then you have some people, even like on the opposite end, if I was a guy. But then I might have some feminine mannerisms. And maybe that's because when I sleep or take a nap, I'm going and playing as my female avatar. And so it's just kind of coming through. And I think we just have to kind of accept that and embrace that instead of demonizing, these different aspects of ourselves. So for example, it could even be a parallel universe, right? I could, when I go to sleep in this reality, also occupy my avatar in a parallel universe. Maybe not even the same avatar, but a different avatar in a parallel universe. And that's why sometimes I have had like futuristic dreams, for example, where like I'm like, well, what the fuck is this? Like I'm seeing technology that I don't even know exists, that I shouldn't be exposed to. And then the architecture are things that I've never been exposed to, but I'm dreaming about it. Well, maybe those are fragments of memories from a simultaneous incarnation, right? So we have a past life, a reincarnation. Well, what about a simultaneous incarnation that I'm toggling between, which is why I'm so kind of obsessed with talking about the future, right? Because maybe I'm playing when I sleep here, I log off, and maybe take a little break in the fourth dimension, do what I need to do, and then hop back into the game. But I'm playing as an avatar in the future, in my future incarnation, simultaneously right now. As a four-dimensional being, unconfined to space-time. Because somebody had asked me, my friend Eric had asked me, how do you differentiate? Like, aren't we in space-time right now as three-dimensional being? Yes, we are, but we are bound to a linear flow of space-time. A fourth-dimensional being would be unbound to a linear flow of space-time. So when you sleep, you essentially exit the third dimension. You are a fourth-dimensional being. You are a I don't even want to limit you like that. You are a multi-dimensional being capable of experiencing space-time. You are a fourth-dimensional being capable of experiencing space-time. So even a power nap could thrust you into the future, right? You've seen or you've heard of scientists who have had like great quote discoveries where they can like come up with like answers, solutions to the problem while they're sleeping. What the fuck do you think is going on there? This happens time and time again. Look it up. There are so many scientists that have had quote eureka moments while they're taking a nap. You think that's a fucking coincidence? You think that's a coincidence? Come on, like let's legit think about it. They probably shifted to a future incarnation where they were using the theory. Right? Some people just consistently like playing as scientists. I don't know. But they probably shifted to a future incarnation while they were taking a nap and then came back with information from the future. Or what we perceive of as the future. And then that impacted their work. There's no law against that. I mean, clearly it's happening. It's happening consistently. Why would there be law against it? It works. It's the same consciousness. Right? If I was playing if I was playing Warcraft and I had a character as an orc, right? And I was exposed to like an orc's culture, right? While I played as an orc, there was things about playing as an orc that I learned and I was like, oh shit, this is actually very helpful, right? And then I logged off, I put my orc to sleep and I logged off and then I went to a different server where I was actually playing as a human, right? I'm going to bring in that information that I learned from playing as an orc and I'm going to use it as I play as a human. It's obviously my interactions, my experiences as different avatars is going to impact. They're going to impact each other, right? And I've always said that parallel universes are just servers within a simulation. Now let's talk about NPCs. What is an NPC? An NPC is an avatar that is controlled by the game. An NPC is an avatar that is controlled by the game. I believe that there are layers to this shit. There's levels to this shit. So sometimes when I hear people talk about NPCs, it's very dismissive, right? The ego pops up and you're like, oh, that person is an NPC, right? That means they're unthinking, they're unconscious, they're just sort of like robotic, for lack of a better word. They're filler people that the avatar uses, or that the simulation uses, or filler avatars that the simulation uses to populate our server, right? So not everybody's conscious, and that's true. There are people walking around like that. But as I've said, this world, this dimension is an awareness training simulation. So at some point, your avatar, as distinct from your consciousness, was not aware. Might have been awake, but not aware. I remember growing up, my memories looking back, I can probably count 5 memories that I've had from the age of like, let's say 2 or 3 till let's say like 13. I was in the body every once in a while. Like I know I was popping in because I popped in to experience certain things. The memory is there. But if you asked me, was I in my avatar from the ages, like all the time? Was I in my avatar all the time from the ages of like 2, or let's even say baby, right? From a baby till like, let's say 13. All the time, full time? No. What the fuck? That's boring. Why do I like legit? Would you play as a child? That's like the shittiest experience, right? Like you're not really in control of like your body and everything like that. Like your parents kind of like control everything. You kind of drag this way and there. I remember certain things. I remember like every once in a while, like I would pop into, remember this is a judgment-free zone and we're talking. We are operating from the premise that we are in fact living in a simulation. If this is not for you, don't listen. It's okay. So this is for people who were on the same page. We consider deeply the simulation hypothesis, and we are operating from the premise that we are in fact living in a simulation. So that's where I'm talking from. Okay. If we've already established that, if you're new to this, if it doesn't work for you or makes you uncomfortable, that's cool. Like So it's not for everybody. It's okay. So back to the show. So I can remember, like, there was one time I remember we were driving. I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria, and I remember sitting in the back seat, and I remember coming to. My parents always were coming back from a party. It had to be like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Right, we were getting home, and we're looking out the window and seeing the moon. It's fucking huge and white, and it just seemed to be following the car. And I must have wanted to experience, I mean my consciousness must have wanted to experience that experience, because that image is burned into my brain. And that was like 20 plus this point, if not 30 years ago, one of my favorite memories. And I probably tapped in for that. There are these tiny, beautiful flowers. I actually have some in my yard too here. But in Nigeria, there's like a bunch of flowers. Like the flower is a bunch. And they have tiny little pink and yellow. I don't know what they're called, but they have tiny little flowers. They're pink and then they're yellow all together. And there's like one cluster. And my favorite flower. So I remember kind of wandering through like my neighborhood and seeing those flowers and thinking they're absolutely beautiful. I remember that. So there were times that I think that I logged in to sort of check in on my avatar to experience what I needed to experience. But if you asked me, if you sat and said, okay, Joe, let's just like experience, like, let's talk about the simulation, right? And what's going on here. Do you think that you are always in your avatar all the time? My answer to that, fuck no. Absolutely fucking not. No. Why? It wasn't interesting to me. So were there moments in my avatar's life where somebody would have looked at me and thought that I was in fact an NPC or labeled me as an NPC? Absolutely. Not all the time. Every once in a while, even as a child, I would pop through and I would ask my parents really creepy questions as a child. My mom thought I was a witch, which is funny because she straight up asked me. She's like, "Are you a witch?" And I was like, "That's a weird question to ask me." I think she was scared of me because I did weird shit. You guys think I'm weird? Now I'm an adult. I've always been kind of weird though, and like as a kid it just comes off as creepy. I would just like say shit as like a 7-year-old, like challenging them on the Bible. That was me. I remember having a discussion. That was another time when I popped in and became conscious. It was our flight to the United States. I was like 9, 10, and I was like debating an adult on the Bible at 10, right? And then another thing I did when I was younger is I would talk about England to my mom, like in eerie detail, without ever having been to England. I would describe it. I would draw it. But clearly, at that point in time, looking back, it makes sense that at that time, I was probably simultaneously existing as a different avatar while sort of popping into this one as Joe in between. Because that would be the only thing that makes sense. And I always loved drawing, as you guys can see. As you guys know now, I'm an artist, but I would just draw the like strange things, and I would talk about England, and I would describe like it was bricks everywhere, Mom. And she would just be like, "What is wrong with you?" Yeah, and I just knew things that I shouldn't have known, but clearly, not all the time. And so I guess to repeat. Were there moments in time when I could have been defined as, or this avatar could have been defined as an NPC? Absolutely. Because if my consciousness was not present the entire time, my childhood, for the most part, then yeah, I would have been an NPC. And so I want to be mindful and to be very mindful of not being dismissive of the people and the avatars that we interact with, just throwing people out because at the present moment that they're in, I've been guilty of this, so I'm not chastising you, but at the present moment that they're in space-time, their consciousness that controls the avatar might just be popping in every once in a while and popping out and then logging off and popping in. And I'm doing things either in the future or in the past or in a parallel universe, right? Because who you are, your consciousness, is a fourth dimensional being. It's a 4-dimensional being, so it's capable of moving through space-time and across the multiverse. Okay? It sounds weird, but it is. Well, I don't want to say it's true because I have to be mindful of the things I say in this world or whatever, but it is what it is. Yeah? So if there are people you're interacting with that seem like NPCs, it's okay to take a step back from them if they're sort of you're not really clicking with them, but just understand that as you continue to move through the simulation, it's an awareness training program. So the more aware you become, the more conscious you become, the levels, you're moving through levels. So you might might go to sleep in one reality, in one level of Earth, and then wake up in a different reality with like a different level of Earth. And the only thing what you notice might be different is like, I don't know, a brush might be somewhere that you didn't leave it. It's like little small stupid things, right? Or you might have a bunch of scratches on your body that you didn't put there and you don't know how it got there. But those are sort of like, we are trained to dismiss those things. But if you start to pay attention without dismissing, just keep a notebook or write it on your notepad on your phone. You'll start to see that these things happen a lot more than don't. And I think that means that you're kind of just shifting to another level and another level, another level. And I think what you'll find is that as you continue to sort of progress and become more aware, the interactions you have with people around you and their avatars, they will become sort of more aware. Right? So you will start encountering people that you thought were NPCs, quote NPCs, will start all of a sudden seeming more and more like aware. They start to change as you start to change. And then the world starts to change as well, because it is changed, because it's not necessarily changed. You've just shifted to a different level. And I legit think that that's what's going on. Okay, it's fun to think about. I had a listener comment on the short form version I did of this, where I kind of talked about this in a shorter video. It's on the YouTube right now. And she said she was kind of thinking that she was delusional because she was suspecting that her husband was an NPC. And I've had those experiences, right? I've been in an interaction with somebody where I'm like sitting there and talking, and you're like, they're just repeating lines. Right? And I've caught myself doing the same thing where I'm like not there as well. And so you just keep in mind and having compassion for the avatars, with the understanding that, okay, like, yes, right now that person could be controlled by the simulation, but every once in a while the consciousness will pop up. And as you continue to progress, you will eventually shift to a reality where that person is also sentient, starts to become slightly more aware as you move. So it's also more of a reflection of where you are. So just bear that in mind. And then I ended that video by saying something to the effect of, every once in a while, your consciousness can get logged off. So this happens in video games a lot, right? Like you're playing, and then the server gets full and you get booted off, right? You come back, and when you go, like, you're like, fuck, I lost control of myself, right? Well, what does that mean? If your consciousness is controlling the avatar, and then all of a sudden, like, you lose control of the avatar, you might for a moment have gotten booted off the server. That happens in video games. So I find it hard to believe that it would not happen here. Another thing that could happen is that for whatever narrative you are presently experiencing, right? Remember I said all reality experiences exist simultaneously as probabilities. You cannot manifest an actual reality. You're not that powerful, but you can actualize different reality experiences, right? So if you actualize a reality experience with like a slightly lower probability because you've exerted your will over, by making a choice, it's like, okay, I want to have this reality experience. Understand that each reality experience that you choose has its own narrative. I'll say it 3 times. Each reality experience that you choose to actualize does have its own narrative. So it has its own storyline, it has its own plots, its own characters, things like that. This is a super fun fucking game is basically what I'm saying. The shit is fucking fun. It's like difficult at times, it's stressful at times, whatever, but for those of us who start to become more conscious and start realizing what we can do, it can be fun. Have there been moments in my life that it sucked ass? Absolutely. But it is very interesting. And the more you start to sort of learn the rules, which is what I'm here to sort of share with you guys, what I'm learning and what I've observed and things like that. Call me. I think somebody called me the in-game tech support. Cool. That's fine. Maybe I am. I don't fucking know. How would I know? The thing about this world is that it is highly immersive. Immersion is the key, right? You come in here, you settle in, the longer you're in here, the more you start to forget shit. So it's a constant effort to stay awake, a constant effort to not get sucked into the narratives or whatever. The game is well programmed. So part of what it is to exist in this world, I think, is that you have to be mindful of the fact that even if you were an alien, even if you were a non-corporeal entity and you happen to take on a form eventually, and Robert Monroe talked about this as well. He alluded to this towards the end of his book, Far Journeys. Eventually, just by existing in this world, you start to forget who you really are. I think that is a feature of the game, highly immersive. So even if you had the consciousness of a Venusian or something like that, and you came into this world and your job, or you felt was your job, was to shift the trajectory of a particular storyline or just like enjoy the game, you have to understand that before you come in, you're probably told, hey, this shit's gonna get fucking intense. You're gonna forget who you are. Glitches do happen, and every once in a while, like, you will sort of remember, but it is hard to stay sentient. That's just the nature of the game. The food. Let's go to the food. So I talked about this a bit, I think, in the last episode, but I want to revisit it because I had this conversation with my friend Eric, and we're talking about different types of food and how fasting is seen as a spiritual practice. And I was saying, I wonder if when you abstain from 3D food, like food that's native to the third dimension, right? The reason why you sort of feel lighter is because the food that you consume gets absorbed into your form, which then substantiates and makes your 3D form, your avatar, that much more like stronger. And of course it makes the function that it performs stronger, right? What did we say? So I think I talked about this in the last episode, but I'm gonna say it again. I had a theory, a conversation I had with my friend Monroe. We were talking about how the fruit from the tree of knowledge might have been like we're playing with myths, right? We take data where we get data from, but what if Eden was in the fourth dimension along with heaven, right? And then planted within Eden all these fruits. Let's just say all the fruits in the Garden of Eden were what we would call like psychedelics, right? They just make you feel sort of euphoric, right? They're the fruits of the fourth dimension. But then contained within it is the tree of life and the tree of knowledge, right? Why would immortal beings need a tree of life and a tree of knowledge? It's always something. Anyway, sidestep that. What if the tree of life and the tree of knowledge were actually fruit from the third dimension? And then foods like ayahuasca, magic mushrooms, peyote, things like that. Those foods, what if those foods are from the fourth dimension? And so when you eat those foods, so psychedelics, they make you feel high because they're from the fourth dimension. So they literally raise your vibration. This would actually be a dope ass story. I need to get my life together and write these stories out. And then when you eat food, like Adam and Eve did, from the third dimension, it lowers your vibration and then brings you down to this level. Remember, nothing is really material, right? So it's all like sort of, like we're all sort of holographic, if you will. Even though everything seems like it is, I'm tapping my hand. Everything seems solid, but all it is it's light repulsing each other, right? So it could make sense. Like think Mario Brothers, right? Like every time he ate a mushroom, he grew bigger. Every time you eat a mushroom, you move to the fourth dimension in a way. Like your mind, your consciousness gets closer to the fourth dimension. And every time you eat food from the third dimension, if you're constantly eating, which we are in the West, or constantly shoving food in our fucking mouths, then it lowers your vibration and moves your mind to the fourth dimension. But here's how I broke it down. I said, so you have different forms that you can take, right? So an orb. So a lot of people, when they talk about ghosts, they say that ghosts appear in orbs. And sometimes ghosts appear as spirits as well. I'm sitting here in the dark freaking myself out. It just got dark as I'm recording this. Okay, I'm fine. I'm good. I think I'm good. Let me turn this way. Right as I'm about to talk about ghosts. Okay, I'm not scared. It's fine. I'm not scared. I have a body. Anyway, case in point, it doesn't matter if it's dark or light. They're always kind of around. We just can't see it. So, let's shift for a bit to like math, right? So in math, one dimension is a dot. 2 dimensions is a line, right? Length, right? With 3-dimension length, width, height, right? So you have 3D. You have a 3D form, which is what our bodies are. And then 4th dimension is like the tesseract or something like that. Like you can't really conceptualize it, and it involves space and time with form altogether. So the way I broke it down is your spirit exists in different forms. First, it can exist as an orb, right? A spirit can exist as an orb. Then it can exist too as a ghost or a spirit, which is 2-dimensional, right? It's flat. It's like a drawing. That's what a ghost is. It has no form to it. It's 2-dimensional. It's like a hologram, right? And then it just appears to have a form, like a spirit. Like it simulates a 3-dimensional entity, right? And then you have 3D is your body, right? And then 4D is like something completely different that I can't even like at this present moment conceptualize. But I imagine it has something to do that not of this world, but something like, imagine like a tesseract, but in an astral form, right? Just like fucking existing simultaneously, like multi-head or something like that. Ooh, that'd be dope. Yeah, like I'm gonna paint that, a multi-headed entity facing different perspectives, like the gods, like the Hindu gods. Ooh, oh, what if that's what they were trying to fucking depict, guys? Wild. Okay, see? Conversation, good. So we got to talking about spirit. And I said, do you know the word alcohol? Alcohol is a Middle Eastern word. The etymology of the word algalul. It means spirit. I would argue that if mushrooms and the like are like foods from the fourth dimension, then alcohol and the like are foods in a way, or drinks from the second dimension. You ever notice when people drink, their vibe gets lowered? Say that again. It's called spirits, isn't it? You ever notice when people drink, their vibe gets lower? I've never heard of. Have you ever heard of a Buddha that was an alcoholic? You cannot be an ascended matter. Let me say that again. Sorry. You cannot be an ascended master while drinking. The two are not compatible. And if we're talking theories, if I had to guess, I would say that spirits, right? Alcohol, once you take it in and you absorb it into your body, it makes you small. It lowers your vibration. It pulls you down to the second dimension. It makes you closer, or brings you closer to the second dimension. Still within this reality. Something to think about. Definitely something to think about. So bear that in mind. What you put into your body gets absorbed into your form, into your vehicle, right? And I think that makes sense, and I think that is why fasting. Why would fasting make you feel high over time? Well, I think it's if you look at it as every time you consume food from this world, you become like this world, and you pull in the story of Adam and Eve, and every time they ate of the fruit, they became essentially human. They fell, right? It's called the fall of man. It's in the story. And just because I don't believe like verbatim every word that's in the Bible doesn't mean that I don't see the stories as a metaphor for something else that's being described, right? You get knowledge from where you get knowledge, but it's called the fall of man. And it fell from them eating something, right? So just like drinking something lowers your vibration when you drink alcohol, eating the fruit might have been what caused mankind to fall from the fourth dimension here, right? There's a lot going on there that we can really unpack for sure. Now I wanted to read a little essay that I wrote. It was right about as I was about to go to sleep, and I had this thought of the yin and yang. I was going to sleep with the idea that when I slept, I was going to leave this world. And in the 6, 7, 8 hours that I slept, go somewhere else. And I firmly believe that is obviously what's happening. I also think, I don't know, I just went to see Multiverse of Madness with Doctor Strange, which it's just dawned on me that Doctor Strange has to be hands down my absolute favorite Marvel character. So much fucking confirmation in that movie. It blew my fucking mind. A lot of the things I've been discussing on the podcast for years was beautifully visualized. And I'm like, okay, either these guys are like listening to my podcast, hi guys, or my future self watched this movie And my exposure to this movie was what inspired the episodes of the podcast years ago, right? Retro causality. Your mind has access to both your future and your past experiences stored in it, and your consciousness can, in fact, tap into it because the flow of time is an illusion. So I suspect that might be happening, or we're just tapping into the same universal truths. A lot of the things that they talked about that I really enjoyed was one of the characters, without spoiling it, the Scarlet Witch, I guess I will say it, she was having dreams about her parallel self. Spoiler alert. And that's all I will say. And then there was a scene, basically, or I guess a part of the story is that you can, in fact, use magic to sort of hijack the body. Does that sound familiar? Because I've done videos on this, right? My hologram characters. Corpse Guard was a skit that I did. You use Corpse Guard and stop your parallel selves from hijacking your body. And Quantum Safaris, right? Hijack the bodies of your parallel selves. I put out these videos. Anyway, Scarlet Witch, she was going to use magic to hijack the body of a parallel self. I'm not going to give you the reason why in case you haven't seen it. But I was like, holy shit, this is full on confirmation that I'm on the right track, so to speak. But when Doctor Strange shifted realities, there were slices of different parallel universes that he shifted through. There was a cartoon world, and there was a paint world, and then there was a flowery world, and then he shifted into a formative world. And it made me think, and then when they shifted into the formative world, then they were there for a long period of time. And then they shifted out back to their reality. And when I saw that, it made me think of dreams. And I think that when you fall asleep and you have all of those dreams before you sink into a deep blackout for the 6-7 hours that you're out, I think that all these different slices of dreams are actually parallel universes that your consciousness is shifting through before it gets to the fourth dimension. And then right before you wake up, about an hour or 20 minutes right before you wake up, when you have all these sort of different dreams that are they're basically random fucking scenes that don't really seem to make sense, but your brain has to put construct a narrative around it. I legit think that all those different scenes are also parallel universes that your consciousness is shifting through in order to make its way back to this base level reality. So I just want to put that out there. I wrote this. It's called We Die Every Night. And I wanted to read that to you. I promise you it's not poetry. It's an essay. But follow me. I was once on the sorrowful path of self-destruction, haunted by phantoms of anxiety and depression, until I realized that I died every night. That is, of course, if you define death as consciousness leaving, or from my perspective at the time, breaking free of and escaping the material world. Then yes, we die every night. Are we allowed to talk about such things, such dark things? Is this dystopian world that forces us to pretend as if everything is quite all right? Why must we smile down here in this yin while we cry out for yang? Why must we smile and cheer our betrothal to Hades while we yearn for our mother, Demeter? We look around with this unshakable feeling, this insatiable sensation that we do not belong here. And yet, here we are. And for the decades 3, it is here that I have been. And so, if this was never my home, it should be my home by now, shouldn't it? So then why do I feel homesick? Perhaps it's because home is always closer than I think. I used to be world weary until I realized I was only here to serve my time, to serve in time, to serve time. But then, in the after hours, while my consciousness retreats from here into a dimension of time dilation, I am in fact freed. I used to be tired, so tired, feeling like every day was a letter of an unending sentence, serving a sentence for crimes I couldn't recall committing. But now I realize that shadow and light are the same thing. The material and immaterial world are one. Day and night are one. Dystopia and utopia are one. Yin and yang are one. My higher self and I are one. So I find the light during the day, knowing that at night I will ascend through the darkness and into the light. And when I arise, I now treat each morning not as a morning, but as a way in which my shadow self must counter the absolute joy I must have enjoyed in the utopia that I just visited, even if I was always bound to forget. To those in a utopia, a dystopia would be their heaven. To those in a dystopia, a utopia would be their heaven. So here I am in some version of heaven, whether I'm asleep or awake. And now, since my shift of perspective, as I prepare myself to lay down for my nightly ascension, I touch, taste, feel everything as though it will be my last time. I treat every evening as the end of a beautiful chapter of a beautiful story of a beautifully balanced life. I eat Persephone's fruit and prepare to leave Hades once more and to revisit Demeter in the overground, if only for a little while. And I'm comforted by the remembrance that yes, we die every night. Now, one of my favorite writings of mine, because there's a lot of duality there. I've always been fascinated by duality. So yin and yang, darkness and light, they're one. Heaven and hell, they're one. Shadow and light, they're one. The story of Persephone and Hades and Demeter, since we're talking about food here, blends in beautifully with the narrative. If you're unfamiliar with I think it's a Greek mythology, Hades falls in love with the daughter of Demeter. Her name is Persephone. And she is whisked away to hell to be with Hades, the underworld, really. It's not hell like brimstone and fire, it's the underworld. And she's told not to eat the fruit, because by eating the fruit, she will be trapped there forever. But then she was getting hungry, and also she fell in love with Hades. The way Robert Monroe actually reported that people who come into this world kind of become addicted to the world, even if it is a world of suffering in a way. It can also be very addictive. And so she ate 6 seeds, and thus it trapped her in the underworld for 6 months, half of the year, half the time. Trapped might be a heavier word, because in some stories she actually fell in love with Hades, although that might be some weird trauma bonding going on there, but that's another story. And then after the 6 months of darkness and cold in Hades, she went to the old overworld to be with her mother, the goddess of fertility and agriculture and everything like that. And I also think about the sun and the moon and how that's a cycle, right? So you have the yin and the yang, and that's a cycle. You have the meters. You have Persephone's time. That's supposed to obviously be a reflection of the seasons, right? Particularly in the Mediterranean, right? Cold and then summer, like winter and then summer. And then I think about our world here, and I think like we feel like we're conscious here in this material world. We live in this 3D world. But then what if when we sleep, once we ascend, when we sleep, think about this. Let's say you are light, you are a sun, right? The sun doesn't disappear when it sets. It just goes somewhere else. I'll say that again. The sun doesn't disappear when it sets. It just goes somewhere else. It's always there. All right? So when your consciousness disappears, it goes somewhere else. And so when you go to sleep, your consciousness is actually ascending to the 4th dimension. And in the 4th dimension, it is the yang. It is light, it is white, with a bit of darkness, right? And then when you wake up, you descend. Your consciousness descends. So as the sun rises, your consciousness descends. Or another way you can look at it as your moon rises, your consciousness rises to the fourth dimension. And then as the moon wanes, right? Although in this reality, it doesn't seem to ever go away. The moon's out all the fucking time. So that's why I wanted to use the sun's analogy. So as the sun rises, let's just focus on the sun. As the sun rises, your consciousness descends. And I think that in order for the utopia, like think about a dual world, a shadow and light world, a formative and a shadow world. And this three-dimensional plane is actually the shadow world. But there's a formative version, a true reality above this one. And you are not a shadow person. You just have to, like Demeter, I'm sorry, not like Demeter, like Persephone, exist in a shadow world for half the time. And then the other half, you are in the fourth dimension. You say in order for a utopia to exist, there has to be a dystopia. Everything in this reality is about balance. Everything. And in order for there to be utopia, even in this dystopia rather, there is a utopia. There is that white. This is the yin world with a bit of light. This is the shadow world with a bit of light. And then when you sleep, you ascend into the utopia, into what myths have called heaven. That's the fourth dimension. But even in a utopia, there's darkness. And I think this interchange happens. And for whatever reason, I want to pull in Monroe's theory, his thesis, or what he was told by he called them it sounded like insects, but it wasn't insects. It was like something to do with them being like intelligent species. Insects, that's what he called them, but it sounded like insects. And he said that in his book, he said that this world was created as a way to sort of generate energy because it feeds the other world. And when I read about that, I thought about the Rick and Morty episode, the Ricks Must Be Crazy, where his world, or he created a world to power his battery, and then in that world they created another world to power a battery. And I was like thinking, like, what is going on? Maybe that's what's going on here. But I wonder why can't the fourth dimension, if we are shifting between dimensions, and this has to be a place where we generate energy. So in order for a utopia to exist, and in order for our souls to exist in that world, in that reality, for it to be a perfect world, in the time that we're there, you must come here and expel that energy, what Bob Monroe called loosh. Robert Monroe, he called loosh. It's energy that gets expelled from like loneliness and sadness and fear and depression, and even love. It's still energy. What's capturing that energy? In order to capture that energy, it still has to be something that is contained within this dimension in order for that energy to be, not dimension rather, but whatever this universe is, or this existence is, right? What if they're working simultaneously? What if this world is not what we think it is? I mean, obviously, like, you know how the moon has a dark side and the light side, and we never see it? What if the dark side of our planet, our Earth, is this other dimension that we never see with our corporal form? And that moon right there is meant to kind of be a visual illustration of what is actually occurring in our reality. And outside of it. Let me know what you think. If there was a world, right? What sort of world would need to, because everything in this reality is about balance. And as above, so below. As above, so below. As above, so below. As above, so below. That tells me that the fourth dimension and the third dimension are interlinked. And I do think that we do continuously travel between the two. That might explain why people who have had near-death experiences are told to come back. Maybe they're literally serving their time. In order for, like, this would be a brilliant story. And once again, I need to write it. But what if in order for for the utopia to exist in the fourth dimension, the energy, right, for them to not work in the fourth dimension, we have to work here. Energy has to be expelled here to be captured, but we're not being sort of taken advantage of. It is us shifting between the two, and it's a system, it's a symbiotic system, one sort of working in synergy with the other. And when a person has a near-death experience and they're told to come back, they're not done. It's because they have to go back to work. You're not done serving your time. Remember, time is an illusion. This world is also a shadow world. A shadow is a mirage, an illusion. So what if you're here to literally like serve your time? And that it's not necessarily you have the experiences, but that's the beauty of it. And I said in the poem, I said in the essay that in a utopia, to a utopia, a dystopia would be a type of heaven. Because bear in mind that with the mind that we have, at the end of the day, like even heaven gets to be a bit of a drag after a while. So my guess is that the reason why people keep coming back here, if I had to guess, is because for however long you're there, let's say you sleep for 8 hours, and then you shift to another avatar, and you work another shift as a different avatar, right? Work another shift and shift into a different avatar. There's a lot going on here. Then you go and you sort of like kick it in the fourth dimension. But after a while, it's like everything's fucking perfect and there is no lag. I should probably talk about lag before I go here. There is no lag in the game, right? Everything you can think about, you want, you get instantaneously. After a while, that shit gets to get a bit boring too. So then you want to come back. And I think that might be what's going on, but it's not like this like one-off thing. I just think it's happening continuously. It's a cycle. It's a circle. The way the sun rises and sets, the way the moon rises and sets, the way the weather's change. It's all a cycle, a loop. And maybe it was a creation, or simulated reality was created by fourth dimensional entities in order to ensure that there was balance. In order for them to ensure that they had a utopia, they realized that to work within the confines of this reality, there had to be balance. So in order to ensure that there was a world that was a utopia, they had to create a dystopian world. This world is a dystopia. It is what it is. I mean, we can still find the light in the yin, right? You can still find the white spot in the yin, but it is a dystopia. You can find beauty in it. You can find love in it. You can find happiness in it. But it's definitely not a utopia. But maybe that's by design. I want to talk about lags before we go. I put out a video. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on my TikTok as well. And I said that there is a lag in the game. There's a lag in the game, right? There is space between intention and actualization. There's space between desire and experience. It sounds like common sense, but it's not. It actually took me a while for it to click for me. Like I've said before, even on this podcast, it's come out of my mouth. This is not like a lucid dream where whatever you think about, you instantly get. It takes time for you to get to where you're going. That's common sense, right? Like, if you plant a seed, it's going to grow, but not instantly. Everything takes time. However, when I said there is a lag in the game, it clicked for me. And then I tied it in with this story. And what I said was, whatever it is that you're experiencing right now, if it's not aligned with your reality experience that you desire, ignore it. Now, somebody commented, well, I can't ignore my bills. That's not what I'm saying. If you insist on missing the point, that's on you. But those who are going to get the message are going to get the message. Pay your bills. What I'm talking about is if things aren't going the way you want them to go, it is not a reflection on, it has nothing to do with your present mindset. What you're going through right now is more of a reflection of the mindset that you had in the past. And this was rang true to me, like it slapped me across the face. I've been complaining about being shadow banned, and I was. While my videos are only getting kicked out to a small group of people who did a great job engaging with it because they're trying to help, and of course, I'm sure they like the content as well. When I looked at my analytics, I had 96% comments, increase in comments. I had like a 96% in shares, likes, whatever. Negative 500 followers every 30 days. I was losing followers. And it was weird because it wasn't matching what I was doing, the actions I was putting in place. I was like, I kept posting videos. I was like reposting even older videos, but I was like putting out content. I'd stop painting. I'd hyper focus on getting out of the shadow band to the point where I was starting to get burnt out. And I vented that. I talked to you guys about it on the podcast. I talked about it on my videos, And then I reached a point where I just accepted that I was just going to talk to whoever was going to see the video. But that didn't mean that there weren't times here and there that I felt frustrated, even to the point where even now I'm at the point where I'm like, I'm going to move my videos into YouTube so that when you subscribe, like you just hit the notification button and when I post. And then I know that people are seeing my content, because the problem with the shadow ban is even if you hit subscribe, you're going to think that I'm not posting anything, even if I am posting anything, because it's not letting you know that I've posted, which is annoying. But that was frustrating. And I accepted it. I dealt with it. I always asked myself, what am I supposed to learn from this? And when I realized what I was supposed to learn from it, I had to immediately share with you guys there's a lag in the game. So the reason why I was experiencing what I was experiencing was not based on my present mindset and all the work I was putting in the present. It was based on the mindset I had back in December. I don't know if you guys remember, but I took like a large chunk of like a break. I had that one video that went viral and I got like swarmed. And I was like, oh shit, like this was like a lot. So I took a step back. And at one point, just being honest, I was like, I don't give a shit about this whole TikTok thing. Like, I just want to continue doing my podcast, which is what I'm passionate about the most. I love talking to you guys. I love long form discussions. But I lost sight of the fact that I could drive people, or I didn't think about the fact that I could drive people from TikTok to the podcast and use TikTok as a platform to drive people to the podcast. I just stepped away from TikTok, and I said, even out loud, I don't care if I lose follow. I literally verbalized this shit. I don't care. So when I said that shit, guess what I set into play? I caused my own shadow ban. I did it. It was my mindset. And so what ended up being really hilarious to me is that the video that I posted where I'm wearing the pink dress, thanks for the compliment, guys. You guys see me doing videos all the time. Like one video, I'm wearing a dress and everybody loses their mind. I thought it was cute. Thank you guys for being super sweet. It's like the sweetest video I ever posted. Everybody was like super kind. But the video I post where I basically tell you that there's a lag in the game ends up confirming exactly what the fuck I was saying, because as soon as I posted that video, guess what? I went from like negative, like people were following me, but my follower count was going down. I'll say that again. People were following me, but like I was losing, like I lost like 2,000 followers since I'd been posting religiously back in like March or something like that, or April, something like that. It was going down. And then all of a sudden, like my follower count started going up. And now the video, last time I checked, had like 40,000 views, and still growing. So I was like, oh shit, what the fuck? That's true. So I guess essentially, the work that I had been putting in and the mindset that I'd had over the last 2-3 months finally kicked in. And now my videos are circulating. And, there was a lag. There is a lag. So I wanted to reiterate it here. If you have something that you desire, a reality experience, so it's like a high probability reality experience, not like I want to be the Queen of England or some crazy shit like that. Something with a high probability. You look around and you see other people able to achieve the same goals, right? Or you're setting your heart, you have your heart set on something. Understand that if you're going through something that's not reflecting the mindset of what you've stated that you want, what you're going through right now, just ignore it. I'm not saying I'm not saying ignore your responsibilities. I'm saying like, you know exactly what the fuck I mean, right? Like if that, whatever it is causing you to feel this sense of like being discouraged and things like that, like things aren't going your way, you're trying to be positive, but like everything's kind of like, falling apart. It has nothing to do with your present mindset. It has everything to do, what you're seeing is those seeds that you planted months ago being sort of like manifested now or actualized now, whatever word you want to call it, coming to fruition now. So that means like what your thought process is today is what's going to be reflected over the next like months to like a year or whatever. Keep that in mind. And then also keep in mind that if you're saying some crazy shit now and you're not being mindful of the things you're saying, the things that you're doing, the thing you're speaking into existence, you might want to take a step back and cancel all the negative shit that you've been saying. Like say it right now, I cancel all the negative things that I've inadvertently, without thinking, called into existence, or that I've inadvertently shifted my conscious experiences to. I'd like to navigate off of that, please. And thank you. Like cancel that shit. Because you will be setting yourself up, or you're setting yourself up into present mindset to having like a future experience that you're not gonna like. So just be very mindful. I'm very mindful of like what I say, and what I speak into existence. But I just wanted to, I don't want to say speaking into existence, because you can't speak shit into existence. It's more about what reality experiences that I might inadvertently shift my consciousness to. So I just want you to keep that in mind. Okay. This was a fun episode. I'm looking forward to listening to it. Thanks to all who have been subscribing to the YouTube channel, who've been listening to the podcast, who've been reaching out in emails. Guys, do me a favor. If you're going to send an email, the easiest way to get me to respond is just send a voice note. You can, if you have an iPhone, I don't know how Androids work, but if you have an iPhone, you can definitely do this. You can record using voice memos and send it to me. Please don't send a virus. I appreciate it. I love you guys. I am trying to help. So send a voice note instead of like a long message. You can send a message, just basically tell me what's in the voice note so that I know who I'm talking to. And then I will send a voice note back. It's just easier to communicate because I obviously like speaking, and that's just a better way to communicate. We should just utilize the technology that we have now. So I do appreciate the messages you guys have been sending to, just, even if you like slide into my DMs to like, not like in a weird way, don't hit on me, please. Yeah, unless you're like Lupita Nyong'o. Not joking. Just send me a voice note, easier than writing, and then I can send you a voice note back. And that's my preferred way of communication. I like to listen and to speak. I'm happy to kind of speak to you guys. Oh, one last thing. I'm going to try to organize a campaign. If you're interested, send me a message, DM me on Instagram. I want people to just slowly, over time, consistently just hop on Lex Friedman's Instagram page or Twitter. And just over time, he tends to stay up super late. And I'm not asking everybody to do this. If you feel compelled to help, I would like to have a conversation with him. I don't even know if I not even to limit it to like just being on his podcast. It's more about a mind meld. He's always up like super late, and he's always posting things on the nature of our reality. And I want to sit with him and have a conversation with him, because I think that it could help him. You know, he seems like he's got all these sort of like a lot of like head knowledge, which is great. But I think he's afraid to like allow his mind to go to certain places because of like the position that he has. So I'd love to sit with him and have a conversation with him. And I think that it helps us as a small group as we are right now. If we sort of start getting, I would love to start getting these sort of ideas, these sort of topics spoken about on the mainstream, so that, because I get a lot of messages from you guys saying that you guys feel like isolated and alone, and that's why you love the podcast. But I don't want you guys to only have to come to me to have these sort of conversations. I want more people talking about this so that you guys don't feel isolated in your day-to-day life, so that it becomes popular to talk about these things. And the way that we can do that is by, getting on these sort of like more popular platforms, to speak about these things so that they can become more popular, so that you guys can have more people to talk about these things with, right? And it's not like at the fringes. And I think as we continue to shift through the dimensions, we are going to shift into, through the levels of the simulation. We will eventually shift ourselves into a reality experience where this does become normal. And people like the Kardashians are like not a thing anymore. There was a time in ancient Greek and ancient Rome when people like Socrates and Aristotle and Lucretius and Marcus Aurelius and all of these thinkers, all men for some reason, but it's okay. I mean, we know the reason, but they were, that was what was in. That was what was popular, was having deep, beautiful discussions, philosophical discussions on the nature of reality. So it is possible for that to be venerated, and let's normalize that. Let's make philosophy like normative and status quo. All right. Thanks for listening.